I like cold coffee too, in case you were wondering. It's not. So, let's have a little talk about racism. Let's have a little chat about how racism proliferates in society, why it exists, why certain groups are always singled out, why there's prejudice, things like that. That was the first thought that came to mind, and I made a commitment that I was going to sit in front of the camera and talk a little bit about it with you today. I remember in my 20s I heard a story of this guy who, as a 20-year-old himself in the late 30s, experienced the devastating cleft of the then country of Poland into two pieces. Sometime in 1939, the Soviets and the Nazis agreed to split Poland according to a pact, then to become known as the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, or Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which would divide Poland into not two equal halves. Sorry, there's a fly right in front of my face. And the eastern half would go to the Soviets, or the eastern part, the third, and the western third would go to the Nazis. All of the Jews that were caught on the western half of the split Poland would try their very best to escape to the eastern sector. And this man was one of those crazy 20-somethings, recently married, who decided that he would abscond to the other side of the line and try to make a go with the Russians, because, of course, the Russians didn't have things like the Nuremberg laws and everything that we had come to know about the Nazis by that point. He succeeded in doing so with his friends. They joined the partisans, they went wild, they had the wildest time of their lives, and to this day, as I remember my conversation with this much doting, much more aged man, he wouldn't even tolerate a single negative word said about the Russians. This was way after the wall had fell and the Soviet Union had collapsed, but even then he wouldn't hear of it. You could say anything you want, that Stalin was a tyrant, that there was genocide in the Soviet Union, that millions of people had died, that he was a dictator. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. This man was absolutely on the side of the Russians. It was amazing. And racism kind of works like that. If you have a negative experience with a particular group in society, then you'll inevitably end up thinking negative thoughts about that entire group of people, which is very sad. It's a very sad statement about humanity, and I'm not going to offer any kind of knee-jerk solutions or any fancy philosophies or any kind of brainiac intellectualism. I'm just observing it. You can see certain people behaving a particular way in your city, and you'll end up thinking that that particular behavior applies to the entire group. I notice a lot of cross-cultural or interracial marriages in the city of Prague. I notice mostly Czech women with African men, not African Americans, but African men from Africa who are living and resident in Prague. It's unfortunate, but it's quite true, factually speaking, that a lot of the stuff that's going on in the inner city of Prague that's a little bit objectionable in the nightclubs and stuff is brought about as a result of Eastern European gangs that are working in conjunction with African, let's call them Confederates, and the people that you see out on the squares in Prague and on the streets in the downtown area are trying to get you to do stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing in other cities in Western Europe. I'll just put it that way. These Czech women who are either dating or married to these African men, they won't even let you for 1 second say something negative about African guys. It's kind of interesting how they go lock, stock, and barrel, full throttle into the relationship, kind of almost like naively overlooking some of the commonly accepted themes about what Africans, for example, are doing here in our city of Prague. That's another example where racism is very personality specific. If you have good experiences with a given personality, you're not necessarily going to be racist against the same group of people who the rest of society seems to harbor a huge resentment towards. It's kind of interesting like that. For example, Slovaks that come to live in the capital city of Prague. Slovakia is its own country. It has its own capital city. It's called Bratislava or Pressburg or Bošany. It depends if you're German or Hungarian or Slovak. That country is now on the European currency. They're on the European common market and they're trading in euros. And Slovaks have a right by law to come and study in Czech universities for free and to take up residency in the Czech Republic without special visas required, or to basically speak the language Slovak. It's a separate language. It resembles the Czech language a little bit, but it is different. And they come here, and I've bumped into a lot of Slovaks who don't want to speak English. Very unusual for Prague, which is an international city, which is not really a Czech city. It's a Prague city, such that Praguers, native Praguers, born and raised, when they're asked where they're from, they say, I'm from Prague. I'm a Praguer. There is such a thing as having the Prague ethos. Slovaks will come here, they don't speak English, they don't speak Czech, they refuse to speak Czech, they insist that you understand them. Their language is not necessarily easy for a Czech person to understand because they have different words for things. There are many times when Czechs will go, excuse me, prosím, s dovolením, I don't understand, because it's not something you hear every day on the streets of Prague. And Slovaks have negative opinions about blacks, they have negative opinions about Jews, they have negative opinions about Westerners. It's quite unusual, you know? And it's really uncomfortable to hear when you get into conversations with Slovaks and they have these opinions that don't belong under the Prague umbrella. And you'll end up saying, look, you know, if you don't like it, man, go back to Bratislava. You know, don't come here and poison the air with your negative thoughts. Now, I know Western guys that are married to Slovaks, and you can sit with these Western guys and describe to them, you know, these experiences of meeting Slovak men and women who have these attitudes, and they won't tolerate it for 1 second. They'll say, man, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, come with me next time and I'll show you. But they won't hear your so-called racist opinions about Slovaks. It's just the way that it is. If you have a good experience with a particular minority group, you're not going to really have racist opinions, so-called racist opinions about that same group. Racism's funny like that. It's tragic like that. It's unhappy and very upsetting. I wonder if you think the same way. I wonder if you've ever had those experiences. And what do you do when you're confronted with a situation that runs contrary to your pre-existing beliefs? My name is Adam Daniel Mezei, and this is Prague, a very open city, multicultural city, a very laissez-faire city, and it is our beautiful, relaxed city. Don't come here and poison the air. Wishing you the best of things.